There was a soft sound as the worn leather bag hit the armrest of seat 1B. The sound wasn't loud. It was quiet, deliberate. But in the quiet, calm environment of first class, where champagne bubbles whispered and leather creaked like money, this sound was very impressive. Everyone turned their heads. All the passengers with perfect hair looked up from their tablets and mimosa cocktails to see who dared disturb their peace. And what they saw made their faces scrunch up, first in surprise, then in disgust. An elderly black woman was standing in the aisle. She was small, her silver hair neatly gathered in a bun. Her face was lined with wrinkles, each one telling the story of the decades she had lived, the struggles she had endured, and the grace she had earned. She wore a simple floral dress of the kind you might find in the discount section, and sensible shoes that had seen better days. A single strand of faux pearl necklace hung around her neck, and she carried a worn brown bag that looked older than some of the passengers. This person was Dorothy Washington, but everyone who knew her called her Dot. She looked at the seat number embossed on the partition wall, 1B. First class, window seat. She had checked her boarding pass 3 times at the gate, 4 times while crossing the jet bridge, and once more just now. The confirmation was clear. Seat 1B, Horizon Elite Airlines. Upgraded. What no one on the plane knew was that she wasn't just a passenger. 3 days earlier, Dorothy Washington had purchased Horizon Elite Airlines for $847 million in cash. She was the new owner. However, she had done this quietly, through lawyers and shell companies, because she wanted to see her investment with her own eyes before anyone found out who she was. She wanted to board her own plane as an ordinary passenger, to feel what her customers felt, to see if the service lived up to its reputation. Dorothy was about to get her answer, and someone called out, "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, polite, and condescending. "I think you're lost." Dorothy turned. Standing in the aisle, blocking her way to her seat, was a woman who looked as if she had been assembled in a laboratory designed to create the perfect example of wealth. Her name was Vanessa Hartwell, and she was sitting in seat 1A, directly across from the seat Dorothy was supposed to occupy. Vanessa was 42 years old but spent a fortune to look 32. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled as if done at a salon. Her skin was smooth from Botox, and her nails had been manicured with surgical precision in a French manicure. She wore a cream-colored Chanel suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and on her wrist was a diamond Cartier bracelet that reflected the cabin lights like a chandelier. "I'm sorry?" Dorothy asked politely, tilting her head. "Economy class is in the back," said Vanessa, without looking directly at Dorothy. With her manicured hand she vaguely pointed toward the rear of the plane as if shooing away a stray dog. "You must have walked right past it. Easy mistake. Go through the curtain, past the galley. Someone will help you find your real seat." Dorothy blinked. She had lived 73 years in this world. She had survived Jim Crow, Mississippi. She had marched with John Lewis in Selma. She had raised 3 sons on her own while working 2 jobs. She had built a cleaning company from scratch, turned it into an empire that cleaned half the office buildings in Manhattan, and then sold it for enough money to buy a damn airline. And now this woman, this child, was telling her she didn't belong here. "This is my seat," Dorothy said quietly, showing her boarding pass, 1B. Vanessa finally looked at her. She really looked. Her eyes went from Dorothy's sensible shoes to her flowery dress, her fake pearls, and finally to her face. The look in Vanessa's eyes wasn't just surprise, it was disgust. Vanessa shouted loudly, "This can't be right. There must be a system error. You don't have a first-class ticket." "I do," said Dorothy, her voice still calm. "I was upgraded." As all this was happening, the other passengers were watching. Vanessa let out a short, mocking laugh. "Upgraded. Of course." She said the word as if it were a joke. "Look, I don't know what kind of scam you're pulling. Maybe you printed a fake boarding pass. Maybe you slipped past the gate agent. But you need to get out of here before I call security." Dorothy felt something cold in her chest. It wasn't anger, just a deep, weary sadness. She had hoped the world would be more changed than this. She had hoped that in 2025, a black woman sitting in a first-class seat wouldn't be seen as a thief or a liar. But hope, as she had learned, was a luxury the world didn't often grant to people who looked like her. "Ma'am," Dorothy said, her voice still respectful and polite, "I paid for this ticket. I have a right to sit here." "You paid for this ticket?" Vanessa repeated mockingly. "With what?" "Your welfare check," she added. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Several passengers held their breath. A man in seat 3C muttered, "Oh my God," but no one moved to help. No one stood up to defend Dorothy. They just watched, as people always watch when injustice occurs in public places, curious, horrified, but ultimately too comfortable to intervene. Dorothy opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a new voice broke the tension. "Is there a problem?" A flight attendant had appeared. Her name tag read Jessica, and she was the chief purser of this flight. Jessica was white, blonde, and carried herself with an authority born of years of being told she was in charge. She was 34 years old, possessed a sharp, angular beauty, and had been working for Horizon Elite for 8 years. During that time, she had perfected the art of making passengers feel either incredibly special or incredibly insignificant, depending on whether they met her standards of value. And Dorothy Washington, in her cheap brand clothes and shoes, did not meet those standards. "Yes, there is a problem," Vanessa said, turning to Jessica with a look of relief, as if a savior had arrived. "This woman is trying to take my seatmate's place. She claims to have a first-class ticket, but that's clearly impossible. I want you to remove her from here before the flight is delayed." Jessica looked at Dorothy. Her expression didn't change, but something flashed in her eyes, a quick calculation, a sudden decision. She saw the flowery dress, the fake pearls, the worn bag, the dark skin tone. And in that moment, Jessica made her decision about who Dorothy was and where she belonged. "Ma'am," Jessica said in a professional but cold tone, "may I see your boarding pass?" Dorothy handed over the card. Jessica examined the paper, her eyes narrowing. The system clearly showed seat 1B, first class. But Jessica had seen upgrades before, and they were usually given to frequent flyers, business travelers, people who looked like they belonged in first class, not to elderly black women wearing cheap clothes. "This looks like a mistake," Jessica said, returning the card. "Upgrades are usually reserved for our platinum members. I'll need to verify this at the gate." "I am a platinum member," Dorothy said. Jessica's eyebrows rose in barely concealed suspicion. "Are you a Horizon Elite Platinum member?" "Yes, ma'am." "What is your frequent flyer number?" Dorothy recited the number from memory. Jessica pulled out a tablet and typed it in. Her face paled for a moment as the screen loaded, but she quickly recovered. The system verified it. Dorothy Washington, platinum status, over 500,000 miles flown in the last 2 years. The upgrade was legitimate, but Jessica didn't care. She had made her decision and wouldn't let a computer tell her she was wrong. "The system shows the upgrade," Jessica said. Slowly, "but I'm concerned your account may have been compromised. Identity theft is very common. For security reasons, I have to ask you to move to economy class until this issue is resolved." Dorothy looked at her. "You want me to change seats because you think my account has been hacked? It's standard procedure," Jessica lied. "I have my ID," Dorothy said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out her driver's license and showed it to her. "Dorothy Washington. Same name as the ticket. Same name as the account." Jessica barely looked at her. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but you're delaying the flight. I'm going to have to ask you to move to the back of the plane, now." "I'm not leaving," Dorothy said. Her voice was still calm, still dignified, but there was an iron resolve beneath it. "This is my seat. I paid for it. I'm staying," she said. "What happens next will affect you even more." Vanessa held her breath dramatically. "Did you hear that, Jessica? She's refusing to comply with the crew's instructions." "That's a federal offense, isn't it?" Jessica's jaw tightened. She had been challenged, defied in front of the first-class cabin. Her authority had been questioned. And that, more than anything, made her mind up. "Ma'am," Jessica said, her voice hardening, "if you don't follow my instructions, I will have you removed from the plane for obstructing the flight crew. You will be arrested. Is that what you want?" At that moment, Dorothy glanced around the cabin. Everyone's eyes were on her. Some passengers looked uncomfortable. Some passengers were very angry with Dorothy, thinking she was causing trouble. A few other passengers seemed to sympathize with her, but they couldn't say anything. They never could. Dorothy thought for a moment about her sons and grandchildren. She thought about how she had cleaned other people's offices for decades, scrubbed their toilets, emptied their trash, doing all of this invisibly, being told she was insignificant. She thought about the fortune she had earned, the power she had gained, the airline company she now owned, and she decided she was tired of being invisible. "Call security," Dorothy said calmly. "Because I'm not moving." Jessica's face flushed. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially by someone like this. She turned to the galley and signaled to another, younger flight attendant named Amanda, who was watching from behind the curtain. "Amanda," Jessica shouted, "call the door. Tell them we need to call Port Authority police on the plane. We have a disruptive passenger who won't follow the rules." Amanda hesitated. She was only 26, new to the job, and had seen the boarding pass. She knew Dorothy's upgrade was legitimate, but Jessica was her supervisor, and Jessica was furious. Amanda didn't want to be the next target of that anger. "Yes, ma'am," Amanda whispered and reached for the phone. But before she could dial the number, another voice was heard in the cabin. "Wait." A young black man in his mid-30s stood up from seat 4A. His name was Michael Chen. He had no connection to the Asian passenger in 5C, and he was a senior partner at a major law firm in New York. He had watched the entire argument with growing horror and could no longer remain silent. "I'm a lawyer," Michael said, walking toward Jessica. "And what you're doing right now is discrimination. That woman has a valid ticket, a valid upgrade, and valid identification. You have no legal grounds to remove her from the plane." Jessica turned to him. Sir, return to your seat. This does not concern you. It concerns me when I see a flight attendant harassing a passenger because of their skin color, Michael replied. His voice was calm, but his eyes were burning. I am recording this entire incident. If you remove Miss Washington from this flight, I will personally ensure Horizon Elite faces a lawsuit that will make them wish they never existed. Vanessa stood up and pointed her finger at Michael. How dare you play the race card? This has nothing to do with race. She's being removed because she's causing a disturbance. She never raised her voice once, Michael said, his voice deadly calm. Yet you called her the welfare queen and accused her of fraud. This is textbook discrimination, and it's on video. Jessica's face went white. Video. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. If this came out, if it went viral, the airline would be ruined. But she had gone too far to back down now. She had called security. She had made the accusation. If she backed down, she would look weak and incompetent. Sir, Jessica said, her voice trembling with barely contained anger, you are obstructing the crew. Return to your seat, or you will be removed from the flight. Go ahead and try, Michael said, raising his phone. I'm recording. The whole world will see what Horizon Elite does to its black passengers. The cabin fell silent. All the passengers froze in shock and discomfort. This was supposed to be a routine flight. Champagne, hot nuts, a smooth journey to Los Angeles. Instead, at 30,000 feet, or rather still on the ground, they were witnessing a civil rights confrontation, which only made matters worse. Dorothy sat down in seat 1B. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for Jessica's approval. She just sat down, placed her bag on her lap, and quietly, defiantly fastened her seatbelt. Jessica looked at him, anger and panic battling on her face. She reached for the intercom. Her hand was shaking. Captain Reynolds, Jessica said, her voice tense. There's a problem in first class. The passenger in 1B is refusing to comply with the crew's instructions. I request that you come to the cabin. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds frowned. He was 52 years old, an experienced pilot with 25,000 flight hours under his belt. He had encountered hurricanes, engine failures, and a bird strike that shattered his windshield over the Rocky Mountains. But passenger disputes always unsettled him. They were complex, emotional problems that couldn't be solved with a checklist. Understood, he said into his earpiece. I'm on my way. He unbuckled his seatbelt, stood up from his seat, and walked through the cockpit door into the heart of the chaos. Captain Reynolds stepped into the first-class cabin, and the temperature seemed to drop. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with graying hair, and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of staring into sunrises at 40,000 feet. He wore his uniform with the quiet authority of someone who had earned every stripe on his shoulders. When he entered, conversation stopped. Passengers sat straighter. Even Jessica, furious as she was, softened her posture slightly. But Captain Reynolds wasn't looking at Jessica. He was looking at the elderly black woman sitting calmly in seat 1B, her hands folded on her lap, her face serene despite the storm raging around her. Ma'am, Reynolds said, his voice measured and professional, I'm Captain Reynolds. I understand there's been some confusion about your seat assignment. Can you tell me what happened? Dorothy looked up at him. She saw a white man in uniform, another authority figure, another person with the power to humiliate her or help her. She had learned long ago that you couldn't predict which way it would go just by looking at someone. So she answered him with the same quiet dignity she had shown everyone else. Captain, Dorothy said, I have a first-class ticket, seat 1B. I was upgraded because I'm a platinum member. When I arrived at my seat, this woman, she gestured to Vanessa, told me I didn't belong here. Your flight attendant, Jessica, accused me of fraud and called security. I've shown my boarding pass, my ID, and my frequent flyer number. Everything is legitimate, but they still want me removed. Reynolds turned to Jessica. Is this true? Jessica's face flushed. Captain, I was following protocol. The passenger's appearance didn't match the typical profile for a first-class upgrade. I had reasonable suspicion of identity theft. Appearance? Reynolds repeated, his eyes narrowing. What about her appearance gave you suspicion? Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. She knew she couldn't say what she was thinking. She couldn't say that Dorothy looked too old, too poor, too black to belong in first class, so she said nothing. Reynolds looked at Dorothy's boarding pass. He pulled out his own tablet and checked the system. Platinum member, legitimate upgrade, clean record. Everything was in order. He looked back at Jessica, and for a moment, disappointment flickered across his face. Mrs. Washington, Reynolds said, turning back to Dorothy, I apologize for this confusion. Your seat assignment is correct. You are welcome to remain in 1B. Relief washed over Dorothy's face, but before she could respond, Vanessa stood up. Captain, you can't be serious, Vanessa shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch that made several passengers wince. This woman is clearly lying. Look at her. Does she look like she can afford first class? She probably found that ticket in a trash can. I paid $4,000 for my seat, and I will not sit next to someone like her. The words hung in the cabin like a toxic cloud. Someone like her. Everyone knew what Vanessa meant. She didn't have to say it explicitly. The racism was clear, naked, undeniable. Reynolds turned to Vanessa, and his expression hardened. "Ma'am, Mrs. Washington's ticket is valid. She will be sitting in 1B. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to take a seat in economy, and we'll refund the difference." Vanessa's jaw dropped. "Are you kidding me? I'm not moving." "She should move. She has a right to be here," Reynolds said firmly. "You, however, are disrupting the flight. If you don't sit down and remain quiet, I will have you removed." Vanessa looked around wildly, searching for support. She looked at the other first-class passengers. A few averted their eyes. One older white man in seat 2A actually nodded in approval at Reynolds. No one came to her defense. "This is outrageous," Vanessa screamed. "I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling the news. You'll hear from my husband. He knows the CEO of this airline." "Then I suggest you call him from your seat," Reynolds said coldly. "Sit down." Vanessa sat, but she did so with the fury of a child being forced to eat vegetables. She crossed her arms, glaring daggers at Dorothy. Reynolds turned back to Jessica. "Get this aircraft ready for departure. Now." "Yes, Captain," Jessica said through gritted teeth. But her eyes promised revenge. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Reynolds returned to the cockpit. The door closed with a heavy thud. In the cabin, the tension was suffocating. Dorothy sat perfectly still, staring out the window, pretending she didn't feel the weight of Vanessa's hatred radiating from across the aisle. Jessica stormed back to the galley, where Amanda was waiting, wide-eyed and terrified. "This is insane," Jessica hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Did you see what just happened?" The captain sided with her. "We're going to have to serve that woman for 6 hours. 6 hours of pretending she belongs here." "Maybe she does belong here," Amanda whispered. "Her ticket is real. The system confirmed it." Jessica spun on her, eyes blazing. "I don't care what the system says. Look at her, Amanda. Look at what she's wearing. Look at that purse. She doesn't fit. And if we let people like her into first class, the real customers, the ones who actually pay, will leave. Do you understand?" Amanda nodded quickly, terrified. "Yes, Jessica." "Good," Jessica said, smoothing her hair. "Now get the champagne. We'll serve everyone except her. She can have water, economy water." Amanda hesitated. "Isn't that—" "Do it," Jessica snapped. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engines roared to life, a low rumble that vibrated through the cabin. Dorothy closed her eyes, feeling the familiar sensation of movement. She had flown hundreds of times in the past 2 years, ever since she sold her janitorial empire. Flying had become her escape, her way of seeing the world she had never had time to explore when she was working 16-hour days. She loved the feeling of takeoff, that moment when gravity released its grip and the world fell away beneath her. But today, she felt no joy, only exhaustion. The plane taxied to the runway. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, offering warm towels and champagne. Dorothy watched as Jessica stopped at every seat in first class. She handed out flutes of Dom Perignon with a practiced smile, leaning in close to ask if passengers needed anything. But when Jessica reached seat 1B, she walked right past. Dorothy looked up. "Excuse me, miss?" Jessica stopped, turned slowly. Her smile was gone. "Yes? May I have some champagne, please?" Jessica's eyes flickered with something dark. "We only offer champagne to our premium passengers." "I am a premium passenger," Dorothy said quietly. "I'm in first class." "Due to an upgrade," Jessica said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Upgraded passengers receive standard beverage service. I can get you water or orange juice." Dorothy felt her chest tighten. She knew what this was. This wasn't about champagne. This was about punishment. This was Jessica's way of putting her back in her place. "I would like champagne," Dorothy said, her voice still calm but firm. "I'll see what I can do," Jessica said, turning away without another word. She didn't come back. Michael, the lawyer in seat 4A, watched the exchange. He unbuckled his seatbelt and walked up to Dorothy. He held out his own glass of champagne. "Here," he said, "take mine." Dorothy looked up at him, surprised. "Oh no, I couldn't. Please," Michael insisted. "I saw what she just did. That was deliberate. Don't let her win." Dorothy hesitated, then took the glass. Her hand trembled slightly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Michael said. "Thank you for not backing down." He returned to his seat. Dorothy sipped the champagne. It was expensive, crisp, the kind of thing Vanessa probably drank like water. But to Dorothy, it tasted like victory. Small, bitter, but still victory. Across the aisle, Vanessa watched with disgust. She pulled out her phone, typing furiously. She was texting her husband, a hedge fund manager with connections across the airline industry. She was texting her friends, her book club, her Pilates instructor. She was telling them all about the travesty happening on Horizon Elite Flight 447. And she was taking photos. Discreet, angled shots of Dorothy, the floral dress, the worn purse, the orthopedic shoes. She uploaded them to her private Instagram with the caption, "Sitting next to this in first class. What has happened to standards? Horizon Elite, disgusting. You get what you pay for." Within minutes, her wealthy friends were commenting, "Ew, how is that allowed? I demand a refund. This is why I fly private." The post was shared, reshared, spreading through the digital circles of the rich and oblivious like a virus. The plane reached cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Jessica and Amanda began preparing the meal service. In first class, Horizon Elite offered a multi-course experience. Warm nuts, soup or salad, a choice of 3 entrees, dessert and cheese. It was elaborate, expensive, and designed to make passengers feel like royalty. Jessica loaded the cart with plates covered in silver domes. She started at the front of the cabin, working her way back. She stopped at seat 1A. Mrs. Hartwell, for your entree this evening, we have pan-seared Chilean sea bass, filet mignon with truffle butter, or a wild mushroom risotto. What would you prefer? The sea bass, Vanessa said, not even looking up from her phone. Excellent choice. Jessica set the plate down with a flourish. She moved to seat 1B. She stopped, looked down at Dorothy, and said nothing. Dorothy looked up. Yes? We have 3 entrees available, Jessica said, her tone flat, robotic. Chicken, pasta, or a vegetarian option. Dorothy frowned. I thought you said sea bass, steak and risotto? Those are for our full-fare passengers, Jessica said. Upgraded passengers receive the alternate menu. It was a lie. There was no alternate menu. Every first-class passenger, regardless of how they got their seat, received the same service. But Jessica was counting on Dorothy not knowing that. I see, Dorothy said slowly. She could feel Vanessa smirking beside her. She could feel the eyes of the other passengers, some sympathetic, most indifferent. I'll have the pasta then. Jessica walked away. She returned 5 minutes later with a tray. She set it down in front of Dorothy with a loud clatter that made Dorothy flinch. The plate was small, the portion meager. It looked nothing like the elaborate dishes being served to everyone else. Dorothy looked down at the dry pasta, the wilted salad, the stale roll. This was economy food. Jessica had literally gone to the back of the plane, grabbed a meal from coach, and served it to her in first class. Vanessa glanced over and let out a sharp, cruel laugh. Oh my God, that looks disgusting. Is that what they're serving in first class now? Dorothy said nothing. She picked up her fork. She took a bite of the pasta. It was cold, overcooked, tasteless. But she ate it anyway, because she refused to give Jessica the satisfaction of seeing her complain. Michael watched from his seat. He was furious. He pulled out his phone and started typing. He wasn't texting friends. He was composing a formal complaint to the airline, CCing the FAA, the Department of Transportation, and his firm's Civil Rights Division. He attached the video he had recorded earlier. He hit send. The flight continued. Hours passed. The cabin lights dimmed. Most passengers reclined their seats, pulled out tablets, or fell asleep. But Dorothy sat upright, staring out the window at the clouds below. She thought about her life. She thought about how far she had come. She thought about the irony of owning an airline where the staff treated her like garbage. And she thought about what she was going to do when they landed. Jessica was in the galley, laughing with Amanda. Did you see her face when I gave her that meal? Priceless. She thought she was going to get the same food as everyone else. As if. Jessica, I don't know, Amanda said nervously. That lawyer was recording. What if this gets out? It won't, Jessica said confidently. These things never do. Rich people complain, and the airline listens. Poor people complain, and we ignore them. That's how the world works. She had no idea how wrong she was. The plane began its descent into Los Angeles. The cabin lights came back on. Passengers stretched, gathered their belongings, checked their phones. Dorothy sat quietly, waiting. She wasn't in a hurry. She had nowhere to be. Or rather, she had everywhere to be. But nobody knew it yet. The plane touched down with a gentle bump. The engines roared in reverse, thrust. The aircraft slowed, turned, and taxied to the gate. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers stood, jostling for space in the overhead bins. Vanessa stood up, grabbing her Louis Vuitton carry-on. She looked down at Dorothy, still seated, and smirked. I hope you enjoyed your little moment of luxury, Vanessa said. Because people like you don't belong here, and everyone knows it. Dorothy looked up at her. She didn't say anything. She just smiled. It was a small, knowing smile that made Vanessa's smirk falter. What are you smiling about? Vanessa snapped. You'll see, Dorothy said softly. Vanessa huffed and stormed off the plane, her heels clicking on the jet bridge. Jessica stood by the exit, smiling and thanking passengers as they deplaned. Thank you for flying Horizon Elite. Have a wonderful day. When Dorothy reached the door, Jessica's smile vanished. She didn't say goodbye. She just stared, cold and dismissive. Dorothy stepped onto the jet bridge. She walked slowly, her orthopedic shoes squeaking on the polished floor. She emerged into the terminal, where the noise and chaos of LAX surrounded her. She walked past the shops, the restaurants, the crowds of travelers, and she walked straight to a private conference room on the executive level. Inside the room, 3 men in expensive suits were waiting. One was her head attorney, one was her chief financial officer, and one was the soon-to-be former CEO of Horizon Elite Airlines, a nervous man named Gregory Walsh, who had no idea why he had been summoned to LAX on a Saturday afternoon. Dorothy entered the room. The men stood. Mrs. Washington, her attorney said, "Are you ready?" Dorothy set her worn purse on the conference table. She looked at Gregory Walsh, who looked confused. "Mr. Walsh," Dorothy said, "3 days ago, I purchased this airline. As of this morning, I am the majority shareholder and CEO of Horizon Elite, and I just flew on one of your planes." Walsh's face went white. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," Dorothy said. "That was the point. I wanted to see how your staff treated a regular passenger, someone who didn't look wealthy, someone who didn't look like they belonged in first class." She opened her purse and pulled out a small recording device. She had been recording the entire flight. "I was discriminated against, humiliated, and denied service because of the color of my skin," Dorothy said, her voice calm but hard as steel. "By your head purser, Jessica, and enabled by your captain's inaction after he left the cabin. Your company culture is rotten, Mr. Walsh, and as of this moment you're fired." Walsh's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You can't. I own the airline," Dorothy said. "I can do whatever I want. Security will escort you out. Clean out your office by Monday." She turned to her attorney. "I want Jessica and Amanda terminated immediately. I want Vanessa Hartwell banned from flying Horizon Elite for life. And I want a full investigation into every discrimination complaint filed in the past 5 years. Consider it done," the attorney said. Dorothy sat down in the leather chair at the head of the table. She looked out the window at the planes taking off and landing, the beautiful choreography of flight. "Gentlemen," she said, "we have work to do." The news broke on Monday morning like a tsunami hitting the shores of the corporate world. The headline on Bloomberg read, "Horizon Elite Airlines sold to mystery buyer. Entire executive team fired." CNBC ran a breaking news banner. Aviation industry shocked as new owner cleans house at Horizon Elite. But it was Twitter, now X, where the real explosion happened. Someone had leaked the video. Not the polished, edited version that corporations release with careful PR spin. The raw, unfiltered footage that Michael had recorded on his phone. 6 minutes and 43 seconds of Jessica refusing Dorothy service. Vanessa's racist comments, the cold meal delivered with contempt, and Dorothy's quiet dignity through it all. The video went viral in 3 hours. 5 million views, then 10 million, then 50 million. The hashtag Dorothy Washington trended worldwide. The comments section was a war zone. "This is America in 2024. Still treating black folks like second-class citizens. I will never fly Horizon Elite again. Disgusting. That flight attendant needs to be in prison, not just fired. The way that rich white woman talked to her, I'm sick." But there were other comments too, darker ones. Comments from people who thought Jessica had done nothing wrong, who thought Vanessa was right, who thought Dorothy should have stayed in economy where she belonged. The internet, as always, was a mirror reflecting both the best and worst of humanity. By Tuesday afternoon, CNN had tracked down Dorothy Washington. She agreed to an interview, but only on her terms. She would speak from the newly renamed headquarters of Horizon Elite Airlines, which she had already rechristened Elevation Airways, and she would tell her story her way. The camera crew set up in the executive boardroom on the 47th floor of the downtown Los Angeles office tower. Dorothy sat in a leather chair, wearing a simple but elegant navy suit. Her hair was still pulled back in a neat bun. She wore her fake pearls. She looked exactly like the woman who had boarded Flight 447, except now she sat in the seat of power. The interviewer was Anderson Cooper. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mrs. Washington," Anderson began, "you've become the most talked-about person in America this week. You bought an airline, flew on it anonymously, experienced discrimination firsthand, and then fired the entire executive team. Walk us through what happened on that flight." Dorothy folded her hands in her lap. She spoke calmly, clearly, without anger, but with unmistakable pain. "Anderson, I grew up in Mississippi in the 1950s, Dorothy said. I remember when my mother had to sit in the back of the bus. I remember when we couldn't drink from the same water fountains as white people. I remember being told again and again that I didn't belong in certain spaces, and I hoped that by 2024 we had moved past that." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "But when I sat down in seat 1B, a seat I had every right to occupy, I was told I didn't belong there. Not because of my ticket, not because of my behavior, but because of how I looked. Because I'm a black woman who doesn't dress like the wealthy passengers they expect, and that broke my heart." The flight attendant, Jessica, has released a statement claiming she was following security protocols, Anderson said. "She says she had legitimate concerns about identity theft. What's your response?" Dorothy's eyes hardened. "That's a lie, and she knows it. I showed her my boarding pass, my ID, and my frequent flyer number. Everything was verified, but she still called security because in her mind, a black woman in first class could only be there through fraud or mistake. That's not protocol, that's prejudice." "And Vanessa Hartwell, the passenger who made those comments about you?" Dorothy shook her head. "Mrs. Hartwell represents a certain kind of American who believes wealth and whiteness entitle them to treat others as inferior. She posted my photo on social media, mocking my appearance, calling me disgusting. She didn't know who I was, she didn't care. To her, I was just a black woman who had wandered into her world, and she wanted me gone. You've banned her from flying Elevation Airways for life, Anderson noted. I have, Dorothy confirmed, and I don't apologize for it. Actions have consequences. She can fly with another airline, there are plenty of them, but she will never fly on mine. The interview aired that night in prime time. 20 million people watched. By Wednesday morning, Dorothy Washington was a household name. She was invited to speak at the NAACP Image Awards. She was invited to the White House. She was interviewed by Oprah, Gayle King, and Trevor Noah. But while Dorothy became a hero to millions, Jessica and Vanessa became the most hated women in America. Jessica's life unraveled with terrifying speed. Her firing from Elevation Airways was just the beginning. Within 48 hours, her face was plastered across every news outlet, every social media platform, every corner of the internet. Someone found her Instagram account. Someone else found her Facebook. People dug through years of posts, looking for evidence of racism, and they found it. There were photos from a Halloween party where Jessica had worn a sombrero and poncho, captioned "Spicy Night." There were tweets from 2015 where she complained about those people moving into her neighborhood. There were screenshots of text messages where she referred to a black coworker as aggressive and difficult. The mob came for her with pitchforks and torches. Her apartment address was leaked. Protesters gathered outside, chanting, holding signs that read, "Racist Jessica," and "You're fired." News vans parked on her street. Her landlord, terrified of the negative attention, told her she had to leave. Her family disowned her publicly. Her father released a statement, "We are ashamed of Jessica's actions and do not condone racism in any form." She couldn't go outside without being recognized. Couldn't go to a grocery store without people filming her, shouting at her, calling her names. She had to delete all her social media accounts, but it didn't matter. The screenshots were everywhere, archived, permanent. She hired a PR firm to salvage her reputation. They told her to issue an apology. She did, reluctantly, in a video recorded in her lawyer's office. "I want to apologize to Mrs. Washington," Jessica said, reading from a script, her voice flat and insincere. "My actions on Flight 447 were inappropriate. I made a mistake in judgment. I am deeply sorry." The apology made things worse. People saw through it immediately. She's only sorry she got caught. This isn't remorse, this is damage control. Too little, too late. Jessica tried to find another job. She applied to other airlines, rejected. She applied to hotels, rejected. She applied to retail stores, rejected. Every employer Googled her name, saw the video, and wanted nothing to do with her. Within a month, she had burned through her savings. She couldn't pay rent. She moved in with a friend, sleeping on a couch, spiraling into depression. She stopped showering, stopped eating. She gained weight, lost weight, gained it again. She started drinking heavily, bottles of cheap wine that helped her forget, if only for a few hours, what she had become. One night, drunk and desperate, she called Dorothy Washington's office. She somehow got through to an assistant. "I need to speak to Mrs. Washington," Jessica slurred. "Please, I need to apologize." "Really apologize? Mrs. Washington is unavailable," the assistant said coldly, "and she has no interest in speaking with you." The line went dead. Jessica collapsed on the couch, sobbing. She had destroyed her entire life in 6 hours. One flight, one decision, one moment of cruelty, and now it was over. She was radioactive, untouchable. She thought about ending it, standing on the edge of a bridge, looking down at the water below, wondering if anyone would even care if she jumped. But she didn't. She was too much of a coward. So instead, she kept living, kept surviving, kept dragging herself through each miserable day. Vanessa Hartwell's downfall was different, but no less complete. Vanessa had wealth, connections, and power. She thought those things would protect her. She was wrong. The video of her calling Dorothy disgusting, suggesting she was on welfare, telling her she didn't belong, it played on loop across every news network. Her name became synonymous with entitled racism. Her husband, terrified of the blowback, filed for divorce within a week. He released a public statement distancing himself from her, claiming he was shocked and appalled by her behavior, even though he had laughed when she told him about it over dinner that night. Her friends abandoned her. Her book club uninvited her. Her country club revoked her membership. The charity boards she sat on asked her to resign. She went from being a social fixture to a pariah overnight. But Vanessa, unlike Jessica, didn't apologize. She doubled down. She hired a publicist and gave an interview to a conservative news network, playing the victim. "I'm being attacked by the woke mob," Vanessa said. Tears streaming down her face, crocodile tears, carefully applied for the camera. "I didn't do anything wrong. I simply questioned why someone who didn't look like a first-class passenger was sitting in first class. That's not racism, that's common sense." The interview backfired spectacularly. Clips of Vanessa calling Dorothy's treatment common sense went viral, spawning memes, parodies, and endless mockery. Late-night hosts tore her apart. SNL did a sketch. She became a punchline. Her Instagram, once a curated showcase of luxury and privilege, was flooded with comments. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. You're disgusting. Rot in hell. Karma is real. She tried to disable comments, but it was too late. The damage was done. She tried to go shopping at her favorite boutiques on Rodeo Drive. The staff, nervous about protesters, asked her to leave. She tried to eat at her favorite restaurant. The hostess claimed they were fully booked, even though the dining room was half empty. She was exiled from the only world she had ever known, the world of the wealthy and powerful, where your name and your money opened every door. Now her name closed them. One afternoon, desperate for normalcy, Vanessa went to a Whole Foods. She thought she could blend in, just another shopper buying organic kale and overpriced kombucha, but a young black woman recognized her. "You're her," the woman said, pulling out her phone. "You're the racist from the plane." Vanessa froze. I'm not. You told that sweet old lady she belonged in the trash," the woman said, her voice rising. Other shoppers turned to look. "You called her disgusting. You tried to get her kicked off the plane." "That's not what happened," Vanessa stammered, backing away. "Yes, it is," the woman said. "I saw the video. Everyone saw the video." A crowd was forming. People were pulling out phones, recording. Vanessa abandoned her cart and ran out of the store, heels clicking on the polished floor, her face red with humiliation. She sat in her car in the parking lot, hyperventilating. This was her life now. She couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. She was trapped, not by bars or walls, but by her own actions, preserved forever in digital amber. Her lawyer called that evening. "Vanessa, we need to talk about the lawsuits," he said. "What lawsuits?" "Dorothy Washington is suing you for defamation and emotional distress. And there are 3 other passengers from the flight who are suing you for creating a hostile environment. And the lawyer Michael Chen is filing a class action lawsuit against Horizon Elite, now Elevation Airways, and naming you as a co-defendant." Vanessa felt the walls closing in. "How much are they asking for?" $10 million. Combined. "I don't have $10 million, Vanessa whispered. "Then you're going to lose everything," the lawyer said bluntly. "Your house, your cars, your jewelry, everything." And she did. The lawsuits dragged on for months, but the outcome was inevitable. Vanessa lost. She was ordered to pay $4.3 million in damages. Her assets were liquidated. Her Chanel suits, her Cartier bracelets, her Hermes bags, all sold at auction. Her house was foreclosed. She moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in the valley, driving a used Honda, shopping at Target instead of Neiman Marcus. She got a job as a receptionist at a dentist's office. Minimum wage, no benefits. Her coworkers didn't know who she was at first, but eventually someone Googled her name. The whispers started. The cold shoulders, the isolation. One day a patient came in, an elderly black woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. Vanessa checked her in, handed her a clipboard. "Thank you, dear," the woman said. Vanessa nodded, unable to speak. She looked at the woman and saw Dorothy. She saw every black woman she had ever dismissed, every person she had ever looked down on. She saw the reflection of her own ugliness. She went to the bathroom and cried. Meanwhile, Dorothy Washington was building an empire. Elevation Airways wasn't just a rebranding, it was a revolution. Dorothy implemented mandatory anti-discrimination training for all employees. She hired a diverse leadership team. She created a passenger bill of rights that guaranteed equal treatment regardless of race, religion, gender, or appearance. She launched a scholarship program for underprivileged students who wanted to work in aviation. She partnered with HBCUs to create pipelines for black pilots, engineers, and executives. She made Elevation Airways a model for what a socially conscious company could be, and the customers responded. Bookings soared. Elevation Airways became the fastest-growing airline in America. People wanted to fly with a company that stood for something, that valued dignity and respect over profit and prejudice. Dorothy was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people. She gave a TED Talk that was viewed 30 million times. She wrote a memoir, From the Back of the Bus to the Front of the Plane, that became a bestseller. But she never forgot Flight 447. She kept the recording in her office, a reminder of why she did what she did, a reminder that the fight for equality wasn't over, that racism still existed, even at 40,000 feet. And every time she flew, which was often, she sat in economy, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She wanted to see how her staff treated the passengers in the back. She wanted to make sure no one else was ever humiliated the way she had been. One day, 6 months after the incident, Dorothy was on a flight to New York. She sat in seat 32B, middle seat, squeezed between a college student and a businessman. The flight attendant, a young black woman named Kiera, came down the aisle with the beverage cart. "What can I get you?" Kiera asked with a warm smile. "Just water, please," Dorothy said. Kiera handed her a bottle of water, then paused. She looked at Dorothy more closely. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God," Kiera whispered. "You're Mrs. Washington." Dorothy smiled. "I am. You're sitting in economy. I like to see how things are running back here," Dorothy said. "How's your day going, Kiera?" Kiera's eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Washington, I just want to say thank you. I'm a flight attendant because of you. I saw what you did, how you stood up for yourself, how you changed this company. You inspired me. You inspired so many of us." Dorothy reached out and squeezed Kiera's hand.
"You're doing great, sweetheart. Keep treating people with kindness. That's all that matters." Kira nodded, wiping her eyes, and moved on with the cart. Dorothy settled back in her seat. She looked out the window at the clouds, at the endless sky, at the world spread out below. She thought about her mother, who had died 2 decades ago, who had lived her entire life being told she was less than, who had never seen the world change the way Dorothy had. "We did it, Mama," Dorothy whispered. "We're flying now."
3 years had passed since Flight 447. 3 years since Dorothy Washington had walked onto that plane as an anonymous passenger and walked off as a living legend. 3 years since Jessica's life had imploded, since Vanessa had lost everything, since the world had watched justice served in real time. But time, Dorothy knew, didn't heal all wounds. It just taught you how to live with the scars. Elevation Airways had become a titan of the industry. Dorothy's vision of inclusive, respectful air travel had resonated with millions. The airline now operated 200 aircraft, flew to 150 destinations worldwide, and employed 35,000 people. The company's stock had tripled. Fortune magazine called Dorothy the conscience of corporate America. Barack Obama invited her to speak at his foundation. Beyoncé name-dropped her in a song. But Dorothy hadn't forgotten where she came from. Every Monday morning, she held an open forum in the company cafeteria where any employee from pilots to baggage handlers could speak directly to her about concerns, ideas, or problems. She flew economy at least twice a month, unannounced, clipboard in hand, observing. She read every customer complaint personally, all 200 of them per week, looking for patterns of discrimination or mistreatment, and she never, ever forgot Jessica and Vanessa, not out of vengeance, out of vigilance. Because she knew that the kind of prejudice they represented didn't disappear just because 2 people were punished. It lived on, mutating, hiding, waiting for the next opportunity to rear its ugly head. It was a Tuesday morning in October when Dorothy's phone rang. She was in her office on the 47th floor, reviewing the quarterly earnings report. Her assistant, Marcus, a sharp young man with an MBA from Wharton, knocked on her door. "Miss Washington, you're going to want to see this," Marcus said, his face pale. Dorothy looked up. "What is it?" Marcus turned his laptop around. On the screen was a news article from the Los Angeles Times. The headline read, "Former Horizon Elite flight attendant Jessica Miller found dead in studio apartment, apparent suicide." Dorothy's blood went cold. She read the article slowly, carefully. Jessica had been found by her landlord after neighbors complained about the smell. She had been dead for 3 days. Empty pill bottles were scattered across the floor. A half-empty bottle of vodka sat on the nightstand. The coroner ruled it an overdose, intentional. There was no note. Dorothy closed her eyes. She felt a weight settle on her chest, heavy and suffocating. She hadn't wanted this. She had wanted accountability, consequences, change, but she hadn't wanted death. "Ma'am?" Marcus said quietly. "Are you okay?" Dorothy opened her eyes. "Cancel my meetings for the day. I need to think." She spent the afternoon alone in her office, staring out at the Los Angeles skyline. She thought about Jessica, the woman who had humiliated her, who had treated her like trash, who had let her prejudice override her humanity, but also a woman who had been crushed by the weight of public hatred, who had lost everything, who had seen no way out except the bottom of a pill bottle. Dorothy didn't feel satisfaction. She felt sadness, a deep, aching sadness for the waste of it all, for the fact that Jessica had never truly confronted her racism, never done the work to change, never found redemption. She had just ended. That evening, Dorothy did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She went to see a therapist. Not because she felt guilty, she knew she wasn't responsible for Jessica's choices, but because she needed to talk to someone about the complex, contradictory emotions swirling inside her. The therapist, Dr. Alicia Monroe, a black woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a gentle voice, listened as Dorothy spoke. "I didn't want her to die," Dorothy said, her voice breaking. "I wanted her to learn, to grow, to become a better person. But she never did, and now she's gone, and there's no chance for her to ever be better." "Dorothy," Dr. Monroe said softly, "you can't save everyone, especially people who don't want to be saved. Jessica had every opportunity to change. She could have done the work. She could have faced her demons, but she chose to run from them instead. That's not your fault." "Then why does it feel like it is?" Dorothy whispered. "Because you're a good person," Dr. Monroe said, "and good people feel the weight of the world, even when it's not theirs to carry." Dorothy left the session feeling no better, but at least understood. She went home to her modest house in Pasadena. She could have bought a mansion, but she preferred the 3-bedroom bungalow where she had raised her sons and sat on her porch, watching the sunset. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael Chen, the lawyer who had defended her on Flight 447 and had since become a close friend. "Heard about Jessica. You okay?"
Dorothy typed back. No, but I will be. Jessica's death sparked a new wave of media attention. Think pieces flooded the internet. Did we go too far? The death of cancel culture's latest victim, Jessica Miller, racist or casualty? When accountability becomes cruelty. Some people argued that Jessica's suicide was proof that the public mob had gone too far, that social media outrage had become a weapon of mass destruction, that we had lost our capacity for forgiveness and redemption. Others argued that Jessica was a grown woman who had made her choices, who had never truly apologized, who had played the victim instead of taking responsibility. Her death was tragic, they said, but it didn't absolve her of her actions. The debate raged for weeks. Dorothy stayed silent. She refused interview requests, declined to comment, let the world argue without her. But privately, she made a decision. She established the Jessica Miller Second Chance Foundation. It wasn't a memorial. It wasn't an endorsement. It was a program designed to help people who had committed acts of discrimination to genuinely rehabilitate. Therapy, education, community service, restorative justice. The foundation would work with individuals who had been canceled, offering them a path to redemption, but only if they were willing to do the hard work of change. Jessica never got a second chance because she never asked for one. Dorothy told her board of directors when she announced the foundation. But maybe we can help others before they reach that point. Maybe we can break the cycle. The foundation launched quietly, without fanfare. It wasn't popular. Some people accused Dorothy of coddling racists. Others praised her for her compassion. She ignored both. She wasn't doing it for applause or approval. She was doing it because it was right. Meanwhile, Vanessa Hartwell was still alive, but barely living. She had spent the past 3 years in a kind of purgatory. No longer rich, no longer powerful, no longer relevant. She worked her receptionist job, paid her bills, and went home to her tiny apartment. She had no friends, no social life, no purpose. She thought about Jessica's death constantly. They had never met after Flight 447, but Vanessa felt a strange kinship with her. They were both women destroyed by a single moment of cruelty, both living, or in Jessica's case, not living with the consequences. Vanessa started drinking. Not heavily at first, just a glass of wine with dinner. Then 2 glasses. Then a bottle. Then 2 bottles. She would sit on her couch, scrolling through social media on a burner account, reading the endless comments about Jessica, about her, about how they were monsters, about how the world was better without them. One night, very drunk, Vanessa did something she had never done before. She searched for Dorothy Washington's contact information. She found the Elevation Airways headquarters phone number. She called. It was 2 a.m. The phone rang and rang. Then miraculously, someone picked up. Elevation Airways Night Security. This is Tom. I need to speak to Dorothy Washington, Vanessa slurred. Ma'am, Mrs. Washington isn't available at 2 a.m. Can I take a message? Tell her Vanessa Hartwell called. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her, Vanessa started crying. Tell her I wish I could take it back. Tell her I'm sorry. The security guard, a kind man named Tom who had worked there for 30 years, didn't hang up. He listened as Vanessa sobbed into the phone, her words tumbling out in a drunken confession. I was so cruel to her. So cruel. And I didn't even know her. I thought I was better than her. Because I had money. Because I was white. Because that's what I was taught. And now my life is over, and Jessica's dead, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix any of it. Ma'am, Tom said gently. Are you safe? Do you need help? I don't know, Vanessa whispered. I don't know anymore. Tom stayed on the line. He didn't judge. He didn't lecture. He just listened. And when Vanessa finally hung up, exhausted and empty, he did something he wasn't supposed to do. He called Dorothy Washington at home. Dorothy answered on the 3rd ring, groggy. Hello, Mrs. Washington. This is Tom from Night Security. I'm sorry to wake you, but I just got a call from Vanessa Hartwell. She sounded not good. I think she might hurt herself. I thought you should know. Dorothy sat up in bed, fully awake now. Did she leave a number? No, ma'am. It came up as blocked. Dorothy thought for a moment. Tom, can you trace the call? Find out where it came from? I can try. 20 minutes later, Tom called back. It came from a landline in Van Nuys. I have an address. Dorothy wrote it down. She stared at the address for a long time. She thought about Jessica. She thought about justice and mercy, about punishment and redemption, about how thin the line was between accountability and cruelty. She got dressed. She drove across Los Angeles in the middle of the night, her GPS guiding her to a rundown apartment complex in Van Nuys. She parked outside, looked up at the building, and saw a light on in a second-floor window. She climbed the stairs. She found the apartment number. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. Vanessa? It's Dorothy Washington. Open the door. Silence. Then, the sound of shuffling feet. The door cracked open.
Vanessa stood there, her face puffy and red from crying, her hair a mess, wearing a stained bathrobe. She stared at Dorothy like she was seeing a ghost. You came? You called," Dorothy said simply. Vanessa started crying again, her body shaking. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I was horrible to you. I said horrible things. I treated you like you were nothing, and you didn't deserve it. You never deserved it." Dorothy looked at her. She saw a broken woman, not the arrogant, cruel Vanessa from first class. Just a human being who had destroyed her own life and didn't know how to live with the wreckage. "Are you going to hurt yourself?" Dorothy asked. Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. "I thought about it. I have pills. I was going to, but then I called you. I don't know why. I just needed to tell someone I was sorry before I—" Dorothy stepped inside the apartment. It was small, cluttered, depressing. Empty wine bottles lined the counter. The air smelled stale. "You're not going to do that," Dorothy said firmly. "Not tonight. Not ever. Why do you care?" Vanessa whispered. "After what I did to you." Dorothy sat down on the couch, gestured for Vanessa to sit beside her. Vanessa did, hesitantly. "I don't want another death on my conscience," Dorothy said. "Jessica is gone. I can't help her, but you're still here, and if you're truly sorry, if you're willing to do the work, then maybe there's a chance for you to be better." Vanessa looked at her, stunned. "You're offering me help? After everything?" "I'm offering you a choice," Dorothy corrected. "You can keep drowning in self-pity and alcohol, or you can get help. Real help. Therapy, education, community service. You can face what you did, own it, and work to repair the damage. It won't be easy, it won't erase the past, but it's the only way forward." Vanessa was silent for a long moment. Then she asked, "Why would you do this for me?" Dorothy thought about her mother, about the bus, about all the white people who could have stood up and said something but didn't, about the few who did, about how grace, true grace, was the hardest thing to give but the most powerful thing to receive. "Because I believe people can change," Dorothy said. "Not everyone, but some. And I want to see if you're one of them." Vanessa broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Dorothy sat beside her, not comforting, not coddling, but present, witnessing. When Vanessa finally stopped crying, Dorothy stood up. "I'm going to leave my assistant's number. Call him tomorrow. He'll set you up with the foundation. But Vanessa, if you don't follow through, if you waste this chance, I won't offer another one." Vanessa nodded, unable to speak. Dorothy walked to the door. She paused, looked back. "You don't get to be the victim in this story," Dorothy said quietly. "But you don't have to be the villain forever either. That's up to you." She left. She drove home through the empty streets of Los Angeles, the city lights blurring through tears. She hadn't realized she was crying. She didn't know if Vanessa would call. She didn't know if people like Vanessa could truly change, but she had done what she could. She had extended a hand into the darkness. Whether Vanessa grabbed it was no longer Dorothy's responsibility. When she got home, Dorothy sat on her porch again, watching the first light of dawn break over the horizon. She thought about Flight 447, about how one moment, one choice, one act of cruelty or kindness could change everything. And she thought about the long, hard work of building a better world, not just in airlines or boardrooms, but in hearts, one person at a time. Vanessa Hartwell did call. It took her 3 days. 3 days of staring at the business card Dorothy's assistant had left. 3 days of drinking herself into oblivion and waking up with crushing hangovers. 3 days of standing on the edge of her tiny balcony and wondering if it would be easier to just jump. But on the 4th morning, sober for the first time in months, she picked up the phone. "This is Marcus Johnson, Mrs. Washington's office." Vanessa's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "This is Vanessa Hartwell. Mrs. Washington said I should call." There was a pause. Marcus had been briefed. He knew exactly who Vanessa was, what she had done. But Dorothy had been clear. No judgment, just action. "Miss Hartwell, I'm glad you called. Mrs. Washington has arranged for you to meet with Dr. Sarah Chen, a therapist who specializes in restorative justice and racial reconciliation. Your first appointment is tomorrow at 10 a.m. The foundation is covering all costs. Are you able to make it?" Vanessa felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Yes, I'll be there." "Good. I'm also enrolling you in a 12-week program. You'll attend workshops on implicit bias, systemic racism, and empathy training. You'll do 200 hours of community service at organizations serving communities of color, and you'll participate in restorative justice circles where you'll face people you've harmed with your actions. This won't be easy, Miss Hartwell, but if you commit to it, there might be a path forward." "I'll do it," Vanessa said, her voice stronger now. "I'll do whatever it takes." The next morning, Vanessa walked into Dr. Chen's office in downtown Los Angeles. The waiting room was simple, calming, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. She expected judgment, hostility, coldness. Instead, Dr. Chen greeted her with a firm handshake and a neutral expression. "Vanessa, please sit down." Vanessa sat, her hands trembling in her lap. "Let's be clear from the start," Dr. Chen said. "I'm not here to make you feel better about what you did. I'm not here to absolve you or tell you it wasn't that bad. What you did on that plane was cruel, racist, and indefensible. My job is to help you understand why you did it, where those beliefs came from, and how to dismantle them. Are you ready for that?" Vanessa nodded, tears already streaming. "I don't even know why I said those things. I saw her and I thought she didn't belong there. It was automatic, like I didn't even think about it." "That's what we're going to explore," Dr. Chen said. "The autopilot of prejudice. The beliefs you absorbed from your family, your community, the media, without ever questioning them. Because racism isn't always loud and aggressive. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, woven into the fabric of how you see the world. And until you see it, you can't change it." Over the following weeks, Vanessa began the hardest work of her life. In therapy, she traced the roots of her racism back to her childhood in Greenwich, Connecticut, where she had grown up in a wealthy, almost entirely white enclave, where the only black people she encountered were housekeepers, gardeners, drivers, where her parents spoke in code, those neighborhoods, those schools, those people, teaching her, without ever saying it explicitly, that black people were other, lesser, dangerous. She remembered her mother clutching her purse tighter when a black man walked past them on the street. She remembered her father complaining about affirmative action, taking away opportunities from qualified candidates. She remembered her prep school, where the few black students were athletes or scholarship kids, always marked as different, always having to prove they belonged. "I never questioned it," Vanessa told Dr. Chen during one session, her face twisted with shame. "I just accepted it as normal, as the way things were, and when I saw Dorothy in first class, my brain just decided she didn't belong there, not because of anything she did, but because of everything I had been taught about who belongs where." "And now?" Dr. Chen asked. "Now I see how wrong I was," Vanessa whispered. "How cruel, how blind." But awareness wasn't enough. Dr. Chen pushed harder. "You're starting to understand intellectually, but do you feel it? Do you feel the harm you caused? Can you imagine what it was like to be Dorothy in that moment?" Vanessa closed her eyes. She tried to put herself in Dorothy's shoes. A 73-year-old woman who had worked her entire life, who had earned her place in that seat, being told she didn't belong, being mocked, being photographed like an animal in a zoo, being treated as less than human. "I would have been devastated," Vanessa said, her voice breaking. "I would have felt so small, so humiliated, and I did that to her. I made her feel that way, on purpose." "Yes," Dr. Chen said, "you did, and you can never undo it, but you can make sure you never do it again, to anyone." The workshops were even harder. Vanessa sat in rooms full of people, activists, educators, community organizers, who looked at her with undisguised contempt. She listened to lectures about the history of racism in America, about redlining and lynching and mass incarceration. She watched documentaries that made her physically ill. She read books by James Baldwin and Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ibram X. Kendi that shattered every comfortable belief she had ever held about herself and her country. She learned that she wasn't just a woman who had said a racist thing. She was part of a system, a centuries-long system designed to elevate white people at the expense of black people. And her wealth, her privilege, her comfort, all of it was built on that system. It was too much. One night, halfway through the program, Vanessa had a panic attack. She couldn't breathe. She felt like the walls were closing in. She called Marcus, sobbing, "I can't do this. It's too much. I can't." "Yes, you can," Marcus said firmly. "This is what growth feels like. It's supposed to hurt. Keep going." So she did. The community service was the turning point. Vanessa was assigned to work at a nonprofit in South Los Angeles that provided after-school tutoring and meals for kids in underserved communities. She showed up on her first day terrified, expecting hostility, expecting to be recognized and shamed. Instead, she was handed an apron and put to work in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for the evening meal. The woman supervising her, a black grandmother named Miss Loretta, didn't ask who she was or why she was there. She just showed Vanessa how to dice onions properly and hummed gospel songs while they worked. For the first time in 3 years, Vanessa felt useful, not important, not special, just useful. A pair of hands helping to feed hungry kids. Over the weeks, Vanessa got to know the kids. 7-year-old Marcus, who loved dinosaurs. 12-year-old Keisha, who wanted to be a doctor. 15-year-old Jamal, who wrote poetry and let Vanessa read one of his pieces about his brother who had been killed by police. She listened to their stories. She learned their names. She saw their humanity, their brilliance, their struggles, and she realized, with crushing clarity, that these were the kids she had dismissed her entire life. These were those people her parents had warned her about. Except they weren't dangerous or inferior or other. They were just kids. Kids who deserved the same opportunities she had been handed at birth. One afternoon, Miss Loretta found Vanessa crying in the storage room. "What's wrong, baby?" Miss Loretta asked, her voice kind. "I've wasted my whole life," Vanessa sobbed. "I spent 42 years thinking I was better than people like you, like these kids. And I was so wrong. I was so wrong." Miss Loretta sat down beside her. Well, now you know better. So now you do better. That's all any of us can do. How can you be so kind to me? Vanessa asked. You know who I am, you know what I did. Child, Miss Loretta said. I've been black in America for 68 years. I've dealt with worse than you, and I've learned that hate don't fix hate. Only love does that. So if you're here to learn, I'm here to teach. But if you're here for pity, you can leave. I'm here to learn, Vanessa said. Then dry your eyes and get back to work. Those potatoes ain't gonna peel themselves. Vanessa laughed through her tears. She went back to the kitchen. She peeled potatoes. The restorative justice circle was scheduled for the end of the 12-week program. Vanessa was terrified. She would be sitting in a room with people who had experienced racism, discrimination, and harm. Some from her directly, some from people like her. She would have to listen to their stories, feel their pain, and offer her own reckoning. The circle was held in a community center in Limert Park. When Vanessa arrived, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely open the door. Inside, about 15 people sat in a circle of chairs. Dorothy Washington was there, sitting next to Dr. Chen. Michael Chen, the lawyer from Flight 4047, was there. And there were others, black men and women of all ages, each with their own story. Vanessa took her seat. The facilitator, a woman named Angela, explained the rules. This is a safe space. Everyone gets to speak without interruption. We listen with the intent to understand, not to argue or defend. Vanessa, you'll have the opportunity to speak, but only after you've listened to everyone else. Understood? Vanessa nodded, her throat tight. One by one, people shared their stories. A man named David talked about being pulled over by police 47 times in 5 years. Always asked if the car he was driving was stolen, always treated like a criminal. A woman named Tasha talked about being followed in stores, watched like a thief, never given the benefit of the doubt. A teenager named Malik talked about being called slurs at school, being told to go back to Africa, being made to feel like he didn't belong in his own country, and then Dorothy spoke. I'm 73 years old, Dorothy said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I've been told I don't belong more times than I can count. But that day on the plane, it hurt in a different way. Because I had spent my whole life working, sacrificing, building something, and I thought that maybe, just maybe, I had earned the right to sit wherever I wanted without being questioned. But Vanessa looked at me and decided in an instant that I was a fraud, that I was a thief, that I was less than. And it reminded me that no matter how much I achieve, some people will always see me as just a black woman who doesn't belong. Vanessa was sobbing now, her body shaking with the weight of it all. When it was finally her turn to speak, she could barely get the words out. I'm so sorry, Vanessa said, looking directly at Dorothy. I'm so sorry for what I said to you, for how I treated you, for making you feel like you didn't belong. You deserved better. You deserve better. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure I never make anyone feel that way again. Dorothy looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, I accept your apology, Vanessa, but words are easy. Show me through your actions. Prove that you've changed. I will, Vanessa promised. I will. After the circle ended, people lingered, talking quietly. Vanessa stood to leave, but Dorothy stopped her. Walk with me, Dorothy said. They stepped outside into the cool evening air. They walked in silence for a few minutes, the sounds of the city humming around them. Do you know why I gave you this chance? Dorothy finally asked. No, Vanessa admitted. Because I believe that people are more than the worst thing they've ever done, Dorothy said. Jessica never got that chance because she couldn't face herself. But you're here. You're doing the work. And that matters. Not just for you, for everyone watching. Because if you can change, maybe others can too. I won't let you down, Vanessa said. Don't do it for me, Dorothy said. Do it for you. Do it for those kids you're feeding. Do it for every person of color you encounter for the rest of your life. That's how you make amends. They reached Vanessa's car. Dorothy extended her hand. Vanessa shook it, her grip firm, her eyes clear. Thank you, Vanessa said, for giving me a second chance. Dorothy nodded. Don't waste it. 5 years later, Elevation Airways had become the most respected airline in the world. Dorothy Washington was now 78, still running the company with the same fierce commitment to dignity and justice. She had expanded the Second Chance Foundation, helping hundreds of people find redemption after acts of discrimination. She had written 2 more books, given countless speeches, and inspired a generation of activists and leaders. And she still flew economy once a month, clipboard in hand, making sure her airline lived up to its values. On one such flight, from Los Angeles to Atlanta, Dorothy sat in seat 28C. The plane was full, the cabin buzzing with the energy of families, business travelers, students heading home. The flight attendants moved through the aisle, smiling, helpful, professional. One of them, a woman in her late 40s, stopped at Dorothy's row. She was white, blonde, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. "What can I get you to drink, ma'am?" she asked. "Just water, please," Dorothy said. The woman handed her a bottle of water, then paused. She looked at Dorothy more closely. "You're Mrs. Washington, aren't you?" Dorothy smiled. "I am. I just want to say thank you," the woman said quietly, "for everything you've done, for this airline, for all of us. You've made this a place where we can work with pride, where we treat everyone with respect. It means the world." "What's your name?" Dorothy asked. "Amanda," the woman said. "I've been with Elevation for 4 years now. Best job I've ever had." Dorothy's breath caught. "Amanda," the young flight attendant who had been there on Flight 447, who had followed Jessica's orders, who had been too afraid to speak up. "You used to work for Horizon Elite, didn't you?" Dorothy asked gently. Amanda's face went pale. "Yes, ma'am. I was on that flight, the one that changed everything. I didn't stop Jessica. I should have, but I didn't. And I've regretted it every day since." "You applied to Elevation?" Dorothy asked. "I did. I almost didn't because I was so ashamed. But I read about your Second Chance Foundation, and I thought, maybe I could be different too. So I applied, and I did the training, and I promised myself I would never let fear stop me from doing the right thing again." Dorothy reached out and squeezed Amanda's hand. "Thank you for that, Amanda, for choosing to be better." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for giving people like me the chance to try." She moved on with her cart. Dorothy leaned back in her seat, a smile on her face. Across the country, in a small classroom in South Los Angeles, Vanessa Hartwell stood in front of a group of high school students. She was teaching a class on empathy and social justice, part of the nonprofit she had started 3 years ago. She no longer wore Chanel or diamonds. She wore simple clothes, drove a modest car, lived in a modest home. She had donated most of what was left of her settlement money to organizations fighting racism. "Can anyone tell me what systemic racism means?" Vanessa asked the class. A girl in the front row raised her hand. "It's when racism is built into laws and systems, not just individual people." "Exactly," Vanessa said. "And here's the thing. I was part of that system. I benefited from it. I upheld it. And I didn't even realize it until I hurt someone and faced the consequences. But now I'm here, trying to make sure you all understand it earlier than I did, so you can build a better world." After class, a student named Destiny approached her. "Miss Hartwell, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think people can really change? Like fundamentally?" Vanessa thought about the question. She thought about Flight 447. She thought about the person she used to be and the person she was trying to become. "I think change is possible," Vanessa said. "But it's not easy. It requires you to face the ugliest parts of yourself, to sit with shame and guilt, to do the work even when it hurts. Most people don't want to do that. But if you're willing, yes, people can change." Destiny nodded thoughtfully. "I hope so, because the world needs more people who are willing to change." "It does," Vanessa agreed. "It really does." That night, Dorothy sat in her home office, reviewing emails. One caught her eye. It was from Vanessa. "Dear Mrs. Washington, I wanted to update you. I've now logged 5,000 hours of community service. I've taught over 200 students. I've started a scholarship fund for kids in underserved communities. I'm not telling you this for recognition. I'm telling you because I want you to know that your faith in me wasn't misplaced. I'm not the same person I was on that plane, and I never will be again. Thank you for seeing something in me worth saving. With gratitude, Vanessa." Dorothy smiled. She typed a short reply. "Keep going. The world needs what you're building." She sent the email, then closed her laptop. She walked to her window and looked out at the night sky, at the planes passing overhead, their lights blinking like stars. She thought about justice, about mercy, about the long, hard road from cruelty to compassion, about how one moment on a plane had changed everything, not just for her, but for thousands of people who had been watching, learning, growing. She thought about Jessica, whose story had ended in tragedy. She thought about Vanessa, whose story was still being written. She thought about Amanda, who had found redemption. And she thought about all the people she would never meet, who had seen what happened and decided to be better because of it. The world was still broken. Racism was still alive. Inequality was still rampant. But it was better than it had been. And tomorrow it would be better still, because that's how change happened. Not all at once, not through one grand gesture, but through millions of small choices, made by millions of people, day after day after day. Dorothy Washington had made her choice on Flight 447. She had refused to be silent. She had refused to be small. She had stood up, not with violence or hatred, but with dignity and truth, and the world had listened. She went to bed that night with a peaceful heart, knowing that somewhere, on a plane flying through the darkness, passengers of all colors were sitting side by side, treated with respect, seen as equals. That was her legacy. Not the money, not the fame, but the simple revolutionary idea that everyone, regardless of how they looked, where they came from, or what they wore, deserved to be treated with dignity. And in a world that so often forgot that truth, Dorothy Washington had made sure it would never be forgotten again.